There is a moment in every chosen life when the fog lifts, when the confusion that has surrounded your sense of purpose suddenly clears, and for the first time in a long time, or perhaps for the very first time ever, you see yourself the way God has always seen you. Not as a collection of failures and almost moments, not as someone perpetually behind, but as someone deliberately designed, strategically placed, and divinely equipped for an assignment that is still waiting to be fulfilled. That moment is happening right now, and you will never see yourself the same way again. Chosen one, I need you to hear what I am about to say, not just with your mind, but with the part of you that already knows it is true. God prepared 2 paths for you, not 1. 2. He mapped them out with care. He placed people along each one. He arranged the timing, the open doors, the provisions. Both paths were real. Both paths were good. Both paths led somewhere you were meant to go. And then, quietly, without a dramatic announcement or a clear moment of decision, you chose a third one. Not because you were wicked. Not because you stopped believing, but because something in you was afraid, or exhausted, or convinced that neither of the prepared paths was truly meant for someone like you. And so you moved in a direction that was not on the map. And heaven watched. And heaven did not look away in disgust. Heaven went still, not in disappointment, in something closer to wonder. Because even in your unplanned direction, you were still you. Still carrying the fingerprint of a calling that no detour could erase. I want to speak directly to the ones who are here right now carrying something they cannot fully name. There are signs you recognize, signs that belong specifically to this kind of chosen one, the one who walked away from a prepared path not in rebellion, but in quiet overwhelm. The first sign is this: you carry a persistent sense of having taken a wrong turn, but you cannot pinpoint exactly when it happened. It was not one dramatic moment. It was a series of small yeses to things that were never meant to be yours. And somewhere in the middle of all those small yeses, the original road began to feel far away. If that is you, stay with me. The second sign is that you feel slightly out of place in the life you have built. Not entirely, not in a way that other people would notice. But there is a low hum of displacement that follows you through your days. A quiet awareness that the life around you fits, but it does not fit the way something made for you would fit. You can function in it. You have learned to thrive in parts of it. But there is a version of yourself that you catch glimpses of sometimes, usually early in the morning or late at night, that reminds you this was not the whole plan. The third sign is that your dreams feel like they are happening in a parallel version of your own story. You dream of familiar faces in unfamiliar places. You dream of roads you recognize, but have never walked. You wake up with the emotional residue of something that felt important, something that felt like a message, but the details dissolve before you can hold them. That is not random. That is your spirit in conversation with a plan that is still active. The fourth sign is a deep and private knowing that something significant is still waiting for you, paired with an equal knowing that you moved away from it. These two awarenesses live side by side inside you without resolution. You do not speak of them because there is no easy way to explain a grief over something you chose. And yet the grief is real. The loss is real. Not the loss of something taken from you, but the loss of something you set down and walked away from and have quietly been trying to find your way back to ever since. The fifth sign, and perhaps the most tender one, is this: you carry a private sorrow that has no clean name. It is not depression, though it can feel heavy. It is not regret in the ordinary sense, because you made the best choices you knew how to make at the time. It is something closer to a mourning for the version of your life that existed on those two prepared paths. A life you never fully lived. a self you never fully became, and yet, even now, that self is not gone. It is waiting at the threshold of this very moment. Chosen one, you were not almost ready. You were ready the moment you showed up here. Before I take you deeper into what this season truly means, I want to pause for just a moment and share something with you. What I have just described, this sense of misalignment, this hum of displacement, this weight of an unnamed grief, it does not live only in your spirit. It lives in your brain. Researchers who study human consciousness have discovered that chosen ones, people wired for purpose and meaning and higher order thinking, carry a specific brain frequency called gamma. It is the frequency of clarity, of breakthrough, of the kind of thinking that happens when everything suddenly makes sense. You were born with more of it than most. But here is what the science also shows. Long seasons of carrying an unresolved divergence, years of walking a path that does not align with your original wiring, suppress that frequency over time. The gamma that was meant to be your natural state becomes quieter, harder to access, and the result is exactly what you have been experiencing. Fogginess where there should be clarity, heaviness where there should be flow. Dr. James Rivers, a neuroscientist with over 30 years of research affiliated with MIT, spent decades studying this exact phenomenon. He developed something called the Genius Wave, a 7-minute audio tool that uses precise sound frequencies to bring the brain back into its natural gamma state. Not through meditation, not through years of practice. 7 minutes. If you feel something stir in you when I describe it, the link is already waiting for you in the pinned comment below. We will come back to this in much greater detail very soon. But I did not want to take you through everything that is about to unfold without first giving you that anchor. Now I want to return to you because there is something I need you to understand about the third path, the one you chose, the one that was not on the original map. It did not disqualify you. Heaven does not work that way. When you stepped off the prepared road, God did not close the file, fold up the blueprints, and move on to someone more compliant. That is not the nature of the one who called you. The calling that was placed on your life before you were born was not conditional on you getting every turn right. It was not dependent on choosing correctly between the two prepared paths. The calling was placed in you, not on a road. And because it is in you, it traveled with you. Down every unplanned road, through every season that felt like wandering, into every place you arrived at wondering how you ended up there. The calling never left. You simply carried it somewhere unexpected. And here is what is remarkable about the third path, the one that left heaven speechless. It gave you something neither of the two prepared paths could have given you on their own. It gave you the knowledge of what it feels like to move without a divine map. It gave you the experience of building something with your own hands in territory that was not prepared for you. It gave you a specific kind of empathy for every other chosen one who has ever wandered, because you are not speaking about wandering from a distance. You know what the ground feels like. You know the texture of a life lived slightly outside the plan. And that knowledge, that particular and hard knowledge, is going to become one of your most powerful tools in the assignment that is still ahead. The divergence was not wasted. The third path was not a punishment. And the fact that you are here, right now, listening to these words with that particular ache in your chest, the one that says, yes, this is me, that ache is not evidence that you failed. It is evidence that the calling is still alive, still warm, still recognizing itself in you, even after everything. Here is a simple practice I want to offer you before we go further. This practice has a name. I call it the return point. Step 1. Bring to mind one moment, just one, when you were standing on the right path. It may have been years ago. It may have been brief. It does not need to have been a grand moment. Just one moment when something in you recognized that you were exactly where you were supposed to be. Hold that moment. Let it be real again for a few seconds. Step 2. Speak this statement. Out loud or silently in your heart. Say, I did not miss it. I am being returned to it. Not as a hope, as a declaration, because what is true does not expire. Step 3. Sit in 7 minutes of silence. No input, no scrolling, no sound. Simply allow your mind and your spirit to settle into what has just been named. If something moved in you just now, if you felt a recognition stir somewhere deeper than thought, I want to invite you to let that feeling ripple outward. Someone else, somewhere in this world, is sitting in exactly the weight you have been carrying. They have not yet found these words. When you press like on this message, you help it travel to them. When you leave a word in the comments, even a single word, you become part of a community of chosen ones speaking into each other's silence. When you share this with one person who has been quietly struggling to name what they feel, you become the reason they find it. And if you would like to remain part of this community as new messages arrive, subscribing means the next word finds you without you having to search for it. If you feel moved to pass something forward, there is a donation link in the pinned comment below. Not as an obligation, but as a way of blessing the next chosen one who needs to hear this. Wherever you are, whatever you carried into this moment, you are not alone in this room. Now, those 7 minutes of practice I just gave you pointed towards something. A science, a tool, a 7-minute frequency that Dr. James Rivers spent over 30 years developing. It is time to give you the full picture of what that is and what it can mean for you right now. Imagine a radio that has been sitting in a room for years, perfectly built, perfectly capable of receiving a signal, but slightly off frequency. Not broken, not damaged, simply drifted from the exact position where the transmission comes through clearly. That is not a metaphor for your faith. That is a description of what happens to the brain of a chosen one after a long season of waiting. Earlier in this message, I briefly mentioned something. I told you that chosen ones carry a specific brain frequency, and that years of walking an unplanned road can suppress it. I want to give you the full picture now, because what I am about to share is not a supplement to the spiritual truth we have been walking through. It is the scientific confirmation of it. It is the moment where what your spirit has always known gets a language that your mind can also hold. Chosen ones carry a specific frequency. Researchers call it gamma. It operates between 30 and 100 hertz in the brain, and it is the frequency associated with the highest forms of human thinking. Clarity, insight, the sudden recognition of solutions that was invisible a moment before. The feeling of flow, when everything you do moves with a precision and an ease that surprises even you. Gamma is not the frequency of ordinary thinking. It is the frequency of breakthrough thinking. And the research is consistent on this. People who are wired for purpose, for meaning, for higher order contribution. People whose lives carry the particular weight of a calling. These people are born with naturally stronger gamma activity than average. You were not imagining the moments when everything suddenly became clear. You were not imagining the times when an answer arrived from somewhere deeper than your own reasoning. That was your gamma frequency doing exactly what it was built to do. But here is what happens. When a chosen one spends years carrying unresolved divergence, years of living slightly outside the plan, years of suppressing the awareness of a calling, because the awareness is too painful to hold without resolution, the gamma frequency begins to quiet down. It does not disappear. It cannot disappear. It is woven into the architecture of who you are. But it becomes harder to access. The signal is still being broadcast. The radio is still perfectly built, but the dial has drifted. And the result is exactly the fog you have been living in. The heaviness where there should be lightness, the confusion where there should be clarity. The sense of being capable of something more without being able to locate what that something is. Dr. James Rivers has spent over 30 years studying this. He is a neuroscientist whose research has been affiliated with MIT and whose work sits at the intersection of brain science, human performance, and the question of why some people seem to access levels of clarity and creativity that others cannot reach regardless of effort or discipline. What Dr. Rivers found, after decades of research and thousands of hours studying brain activity, is that the gap between the people who access their full potential and the people who remain perpetually just beneath it is not a gap in intelligence. It is not a gap in willpower or character or faith. It is a gap in frequency. Specifically, the gap is in the brain's ability to sustain gamma activity during ordinary waking life. And then he found something that changed everything. He discovered that the brain can be brought back into its natural gamma state. Not through years of meditation practice, though meditation has its place. Not through pharmaceutical intervention. Not through a complicated regimen that requires expertise or equipment. Through sound. Specifically through a precise combination of sound frequencies delivered in a specific sequence designed to invite the brain to synchronize with the gamma state from the outside in. The technical name for this process is brainwave entrainment. The principle is elegant in its simplicity. The brain has a natural tendency to synchronize with rhythmic external stimuli. Give it the right frequency in the right sequence, and it will follow. Like a tuning fork held next to a string, the resonance transfers. Dr. Rivers took this principle and spent years refining it into something that anyone could use. The result is called the Genius Wave. It is a 7-minute audio track. You put on a pair of headphones, you press play, and you allow the precisely calibrated frequencies in the recording to guide your brain back into its natural gamma state. That is it. No technique to learn, no mental discipline required, no prior experience with meditation or breathwork or anything else. 7 minutes. And the reason 7 minutes is sufficient is not arbitrary. Dr. Rivers identified that 7 minutes is the optimal window for brainwave entrainment to take hold without overtaxing the system. Long enough to create genuine synchronization. Short enough that the brain receives it as a natural invitation rather than an effort. You may remember that in the practice section a few minutes ago, I asked you to sit in 7 minutes of silence. That was not accidental. That silence was a preparation, a clearing of the internal space. What the Genius Wave does is take that space and fill it with the precise frequency your brain was built to operate in. I want to tell you about someone. A woman who had spent 11 years working in a field that was adjacent to her calling, but never quite it. She knew, in the way chosen ones know things, that she had stepped off the prepared path somewhere in her late 20s. By the time she found the Genius Wave, she was not in crisis. She was simply tired in a way that sleep did not fix. She used it every morning for 3 weeks. She told me that the change was not dramatic at first. It was subtle. She started finishing sentences in her own mind that she had been leaving incomplete for years. Then she started making decisions without the usual paralysis. Then, in the 5th week, she received an opportunity in the exact area of her original calling, from a direction she had not anticipated, and she recognized it immediately. She said it felt like her brain finally had enough clarity to see what had always been there. That is not coincidence. That is gamma doing what gamma does when it is no longer suppressed. I know some of you are thinking that $39 is not nothing, and that feeling is valid. You have spent years being careful with resources, weighing every decision, carrying the particular financial caution of someone who has been walking a path without a guaranteed provision. I understand that, and I want to honor it rather than dismiss it. But I also want you to consider this. What is the cost of another year inside the fog? What is the cost of another 12 months of being capable of more and unable to access it? $39 for a tool that Dr. Rivers spent 30 years developing. That comes with a 90-day money-back guarantee, meaning you have 3 full months to experience it and decide for yourself whether it changed anything. If it does not, you pay nothing. The risk is not yours to carry. The regular price for the Genius Wave is $49. Right now, through the link in the pinned comment below, it is available for $39. That is the link, the pinned comment, not a search result, not a third-party site. Only the link in the pinned comment is the legit source. There are imitation products circulating that use similar language and similar names. They are not the same. They do not contain Dr. Rivers' research. They will not produce the same result. Please protect yourself by purchasing only through the single link pinned below. This price and this availability are not permanent. The $39 access point exists for a limited window and a limited number of people. I am not saying this to create pressure. I am saying it because I would rather you hear it plainly from me now than discover later that the window had closed. If something in you recognized itself in everything I have described today, if the fog I named is a fog you have been living in, if the frequency I described is one you can feel the absence of, then the Genius Wave is not a product I am pointing you toward. It is a tool that was built for exactly the moment you are standing in right now. The radio is still there. It is still perfectly built. It has never stopped being capable of receiving the transmission. It simply needs the dial moved back to the exact frequency where the signal comes through clearly. 7 minutes, 1 link, pinned below. There is a particular kind of loneliness that does not come from being alone. It comes from being surrounded by people who cannot see what you are carrying. People who look at your life from the outside and see someone who is functioning, someone who is managing, someone who appears to have things reasonably together. And yet inside, in the place where only you live, there is a weight that has no adequate description. A knowing that something significant happened or failed to happen on the road behind you, and no language available to explain it to anyone who was not there. If you are still with me, it is because you recognized something in what I said in the last section. And I want to go deeper now, not into theory, into the specific texture of what you have been living. Because one of the things that chosen ones in this particular season carry is the exhausting labor of translating their inner experience into words that make sense to people who have not felt it. And I want to release you from that labor for the next few minutes. I already know what you have been feeling. Let me name it for you. The first sign is a sudden wave of grief that arrives without warning and seems to be directed at a fork in the road you passed years ago. It does not arrive during moments of obvious loss. It arrives in ordinary moments, while you are washing dishes, while you are driving a familiar route, while you are sitting in a room full of people who have no idea that something just moved through you. It is a grief for a turning point, for a version of your life that existed on the other side of a decision you made or failed to make. And because the grief has no current event attached to it, it is almost impossible to explain. People around you see someone who is momentarily distant. They do not see someone mourning a path that closed years ago. The second sign is that familiar environments have begun to feel like borrowed clothes. The people in your daily life, the places you move through, the routines you have built, they fit. They function. But they carry the quiet wrongness of something that was designed for a slightly different version of you. Not because the people are bad or the places are wrong, but because some part of you knows they were assembled on the third path, the unplanned one, and that the self who was meant to walk the prepared road would have built something that felt like it was made to measure. You are not ungrateful. You have not stopped loving the people around you. But there is a subtle displacement that follows you through spaces that should feel like home, and you have stopped trying to explain it because you cannot make it make sense to anyone else. The third sign is a recurring dream of being in motion, but headed somewhere unplanned. The details change, the locations shift, but the emotional core is always the same. You are moving, you are capable, you know how to navigate, but the destination is not the one you intended. Sometimes in the dream, you are trying to get back to something. Sometimes you are simply aware, with that particular dream awareness, that you are not where you meant to be. You wake from these dreams not frightened, but quietly unsettled, as though your spirit spent the night trying to work something out that your waking mind has not yet resolved. The fourth sign is that the same message keeps reaching you from multiple unrelated directions. A line in a book you were not expecting to find meaningful. A conversation that takes an unexpected turn and lands on something you have been privately holding. A lyric, a verse, a stranger's passing comment that strikes you with a precision that feels anything but accidental. You have noticed this pattern. You have perhaps dismissed it as coincidence more than once, but it has been persistent. And what it has always been, is not coincidence. It is a coordinated signal from a plan that is still operational. Heaven does not stop sending the message simply because the intended recipient took a detour. It finds new routes. It keeps arriving. Now I want to speak to the specific pains, not in general terms, but in the particular, the sleeplessness, the kind that comes not from a busy mind, but from a deep mind. You lie down and the surface of you is tired, genuinely tired, but something underneath is wide awake and working, processing, reviewing, turning something over and over in the dark that will not resolve into a clear conclusion. You have tried to identify what it is. Some nights it feels like anxiety. Some nights it feels like anticipation. Most nights it feels like both at once. What it actually is a spirit that knows it is close to something. A calling that has been quiet for a long time and is beginning to make noise again. The loneliness of a secret. Not a shameful secret, but a private one. The secret of knowing that you diverged from a prepared path and that the life you are living, though real and full in its own way, is not the complete version. You cannot share this with most people because most people do not have a category for it. They will either minimize it, telling you to be grateful for what you have, or they will misunderstand it, assuming you are dissatisfied in a way that sounds like ingratitude. And so you carry it quietly, which means you carry it alone. The feeling of being misunderstood not by individuals, but by your own circumstances. As though the life around you was built for someone who made different choices, and you have been inhabiting it as best you can, but it does not quite speak your language. It does not quite reflect back the person you know yourself to be at the deepest level. That is not a small thing to carry. And I want to say clearly and without softening it, that has been genuinely hard. The weight of that is real, and it deserves to be named before it is reframed. So let me name it fully before I say anything else. You paid a price for the third path, not because God punished you for taking it, but because any road walked outside of the prepared plan carries its own particular cost. And you have been paying that cost in the currency of quiet displacement, private grief, and the particular exhaustion of someone who has been managing well on the outside while something unresolved lives on the inside. Now, having named that, let me offer you a different way to see where you are standing. You are not being punished. You are being positioned. These two experiences can feel identical from the inside, and that is one of the cruelest aspects of this season. Being punished and being positioned both involve restriction, both involve a sense of waiting, both involve a gap between where you are and where you sense you should be. But they are not the same thing. Punishment moves you away from something. Positioning moves you towards something, and the evidence that you are being positioned rather than punished is the very fact that the signal keeps arriving, that the message keeps finding you from new directions, that the grief you carry is not the grief of someone who has lost the call. It is the grief of someone who has temporarily lost the road to it. The call itself is intact. There is a distinction I want to draw carefully here between two experiences that chosen ones often confuse. Being overlooked means being invisible to the people and processes that should have seen you. Being rerouted means being redirected by the same hand that laid the original plan. Overlooked is something done to you by limited human vision. Rerouted is something done for you by unlimited divine intelligence. And what I am telling you today is that the third path, the one that left heaven speechless, was not the end of the plan. It was absorbed into the plan. The God who saw you choose it did not scramble to adjust. He had already accounted for it. And what is being built now, in this season, in this moment of recognition, is not a lesser version of the original. It is the version that includes everything the third path taught you. Among the chosen ones reading these words right now, there are people all over this world arriving at this same recognition at the same moment you are. They have been carrying the same unnamed weight. They are sitting in the same quiet place of seeing themselves for the first time with clarity and compassion together. If this message has named something real in you today, I want to gently invite you to press like, not for this channel, but so that the next person carrying this same weight finds their way to these words. Leave something in the comments, a word, a single line, as a marker that you were here and that you showed up for yourself today. And if someone comes to mind, someone who has been struggling to find stillness in a season that has been far too loud, would you consider sharing this with them? You could be the reason they find the words they have needed. There is also a link in the pinned comment if you feel moved to leave a blessing for the next chosen one who finds their way here. And if you choose to subscribe, you are not simply following a channel. You are choosing to remain part of a community of chosen ones who are waking up together. If you recognize yourself in what has been named here today, type the words "I see it" in the comments below. Not as a performance, as a declaration, as a way of saying I was here, I was seen, and I did not look away. Let me stay with you here for a moment before we move forward, because what was named in the last section was not small. The grief over a fork in the road, the displacement of inhabiting a life built on the third path, the loneliness of a secret that has no clean language. These are not things to be quickly resolved and moved past. They are things to be honored, and that is what this section is for. Not to fix what was named, not to reframe it prematurely into something more comfortable, but to sit down inside the truth of what it cost, and to let that cost be fully acknowledged before anything else is said. Because here is what I have noticed about chosen ones who took a third path. They are often the quickest to minimize their own pain. They feel, somewhere underneath the grief, a layer of responsibility for it. A sense that because they chose the divergence, they have forfeited the right to mourn what it cost. That the appropriate response to a self-made detour is quiet endurance, not acknowledged grief, and so they push through. They manage. They build what can be built on the unplanned road, and they carry the loss of the prepared one in silence, telling themselves that bringing it up would be self-indulgent, that others have suffered more, that they made their choices, and now they simply have to live with them. I want to speak directly into that posture and gently dismantle it. Not because it is wrong to take responsibility for your choices. Taking responsibility is right, and it is mature. But there is a difference between taking responsibility and denying yourself the dignity of grief. You can own a decision and still mourn what it cost. You can acknowledge that you chose the third path and still allow yourself to feel the weight of what remained unlived on the other two. Both things are true at the same time, and the chosen ones, who try to carry only one of those truths while suppressing the other, are the ones who arrive at middle seasons of life with exhaustion that has no identifiable source, because the grief did not disappear. It simply went underground. And underground grief is heavier than acknowledged grief, because underground grief has to be managed constantly, while acknowledged grief can be set down. So let me name what the third path actually cost. Not in gentle, softened language. In plain terms, it cost you relationships that could have been built differently. On the prepared path, you would have arrived in certain places at certain times and met certain people who were positioned there for you. That meeting never happened, or it happened late, after the window for what it could have been had already narrowed. There are connections that existed in the original plan that the third path redirected you away from. People who could have known the fullest version of you. People with whom you could have built something that reflected the calling rather than the detour. Some of those connections were replaced by others. Some were simply absent, and the absence has shaped the relational landscape of your life in ways that you have felt without always being able to trace back to their source. It cost you a version of your work and your contribution that could have gone further. Not because you are not capable. You have always been capable, but capability expressed outside of alignment produces a different result than capability expressed inside of it. You have worked hard on the third path. You have contributed genuinely. You have built things that matter. But there is a version of your contribution that existed on the prepared road that would have carried a different weight, a different reach, a different quality of impact, and you have sensed its absence. The feeling that what you are doing is good but not quite the thing, that you are using the gifts but not in the precise context for which they were designed. That sensing is accurate, and it is a legitimate loss. It cost you the freedom to speak the original dream out loud. At some point on the third path, the gap between where you were and what you had originally sensed you were called to became wide enough that speaking the dream felt foolish or presumptuous or simply too painful, because to name it was to feel the difference between the naming and the living. And so the dream went quiet, not gone, never gone, but quiet. You stopped saying it. You stopped writing it down. You stored it somewhere internal, where it could stay warm, without having to face the cold air of being spoken into a life that did not yet reflect it. And that silencing was its own particular cost, because dreams that cannot be spoken begin to feel like they belong to someone else, like they were meant for a version of you that no longer exists. That is not true, but it felt true, and that feeling shaped years. And perhaps most tenderly of all, it cost you something in your relationship with your own judgment. Because when you choose a path that diverges from what you sensed was right. And then you live on that path long enough to see what it cost. You begin to second-guess the instrument itself. You begin to wonder whether your sense of calling was ever accurate, whether the two prepared paths were real or imagined, whether you can trust the inner signal at all, given that you walked away from it once. And that self-doubt, that erosion of trust in your own spiritual perception, is one of the quietest and most damaging things the third path produced, because the instrument was never broken. The sensing was never wrong. You simply could not sustain the confidence to follow it at the moment when the choice was made. I want to bring you now to a man who knew all of this, not as a concept, as a lived experience of the bones. His name was Jonah. And the first thing you need to know about Jonah is that he was genuinely called, not assumed to be called, not hoping to be called, specifically, directly, unambiguously called. The word of the Lord came to him. The assignment was clear. The direction was named. And Jonah, a chosen one with a confirmed calling and a clear instruction, rose up and went in the opposite direction, not out of wickedness, out of something more complicated than wickedness, out of the particular mixture of fear and resistance and private reasoning that chosen ones have always used to justify the third path. He had his reasons. They made sense to him, and he moved. He found a ship going the other way. He paid the fare. He went down into the ship. The language of the text is deliberate. He went down. And then the storm came, not a gentle rain, a violent wind, a mighty tempest, the kind that made experienced sailors afraid, the kind that broke things. And Jonah, the one who had caused the storm by his divergence, was asleep below deck while everything around him was breaking. There is something almost unbearable about that image. A chosen one, specifically called, who chose a third direction, lying asleep in the belly of a ship while a storm of his own making tears at everything around him, not unconscious to his responsibility, simply in the particular numbness that settles over a chosen one who has traveled far enough from the prepared path that they have stopped feeling the turbulence, who has built enough distance from the original call that the storm outside has stopped registering as related to the choice inside. The sailors woke him. They cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah. And he told them the truth. He told them who he was, and what he had done and why the sea was raging. And then he told them to throw him in, not because he had given up, but because he understood, in that moment of forced reckoning, that the storm was not going to stop as long as he remained on the ship headed the wrong way. The only movement available to him was down, and they threw him into the sea, and a great fish swallowed him. And Jonah was in the belly of that fish for 3 days and 3 nights. I want you to sit with that before I say anything else. 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the deep, in absolute darkness, in a place that was not punishing him, in a place that was, in the most unexpected possible way, holding him, because the great fish did not consume him. It contained him. And in that containment, in that absolute bottom, in that place where there was nowhere further down to go, Jonah did the one thing he had not done since he stepped onto the ship. Going the other way, he prayed. Not the prayer of someone who had everything together. The prayer of someone at the absolute floor of their own divergence. From the belly of the deep, from the place where the waters surrounded him, and the weeds were wrapped around his head, and the earth with her bars closed around him. Forever he lifted his voice, and what he said in that prayer, what he confessed and declared and reached toward from the lowest place a chosen one can occupy, is where we are going next, because you are not in that fish by accident. And the prayer that Jonah prayed from the deep is one your spirit already knows the shape of. There is something that happens when a chosen one begins to turn back toward the original call. Something that is not quite hope yet, because hope feels too light for what this is. And it is not quite peace yet, because peace feels too settled for someone still finding their footing. It is something in between, a quality of attention that arrives when the spirit begins to recognize that the ground beneath it is shifting, that the direction of movement is changing, that what was descending is now, imperceptibly but genuinely, beginning to rise. If you are feeling that right now, I want you to know that what you are feeling is accurate. It is not wishful thinking. It is not the temporary relief of a message that felt good in the moment. It is a real internal movement. And I want to give you two ancient frameworks, two ways of understanding time and process that have existed for thousands of years, that will help you understand not just what is happening, but why it is happening now, and why the timing is not accidental. The first framework comes from the ancient Greek language, which gives us two entirely different words for time. The first word is chronos. Chronos is clock time, calendar time, the time that can be measured in seconds and years and decades. It is the time that you have been counting since the divergence, the years since you stepped onto the third path, the distance between the moment the choice was made and the moment you are standing in right now. Chronos is the time that feels like loss when you look backward, because in Chronos terms, years have passed, opportunities have closed, the window for certain things has narrowed. And if Chronos is the only kind of time you believe in, then the arithmetic of your situation produces a conclusion that is genuinely discouraging. But the ancient Greeks knew that Chronos was not the only kind of time. They had a second word, Kairos. And Kairos does not mean clock time. Kairos means the appointed moment, the right time. The moment when conditions align in such a way that what was not possible before becomes not only possible but inevitable. Kairos is not measured in years. It cannot be measured at all. It arrives. And when it arrives, it does not ask how long you have been waiting or how far you have traveled from the prepared path. It simply opens, like a window that has been latched from the inside. And then, in a moment that cannot be predicted by the calendar, the latch releases. Here is what I want you to understand about Kairos and what it means for where you are standing right now. The years you spent on the third path were Chronos years. They moved at the rate of the clock. They accumulated in the way that time accumulates. And from within Chronos, they may have looked like wasted years, like distance from the plan, like evidence that the prepared paths were no longer accessible. But Kairos does not operate inside Chronos logic. Kairos is not governed by how much time has passed. It is governed by readiness, by alignment, by the particular convergence of internal formation and external preparation that only the one who designed the original plan can orchestrate. And this is the word I want to speak over your life right now. You are not living in a Chronos moment of loss. You are standing at a Kairos threshold. The door that is opening in front of you is not opening despite the years on the third path. It is opening because of what those years produced in you. The Kairos moment does not reward effort or punish detour. It simply recognizes when the vessel is ready for what was always intended to be poured into it. And something in you is ready now in a way it could not have been before the third path was walked. Not because suffering is required for calling, but because the specific formation that happened on your specific unplanned road produced something in you that the prepared paths, walked in the way you would have walked them before all of this, could not have produced on their own. This is positioning, not reward for effort. You did not earn this moment by suffering long enough. The Kairos door does not open on that basis. It opens because the divine intelligence that designed the original plan has been working in the Chronos years simultaneously, and now the two streams are converging. The clock time and the appointed time are meeting at this exact juncture, and you are standing exactly where you need to be to receive what is about to move. The second ancient framework I want to give you comes from the Hebrew language. It is a single word, kavah. It is often translated in scripture as wait, but the translation is almost criminally insufficient because kava does not mean passive waiting. It does not mean sitting in a room hoping something will eventually happen. The root of kava is a verb that means to twist together, to braid, to interweave strands into something that is stronger than any single strand on its own. When the ancient Hebrew writers used the word kava, they were not describing a person sitting still. They were describing a rope being made. The process of taking individual threads, each one insufficient on its own, and twisting them together under tension until they become something capable of bearing weight. Something that does not break under pressure, precisely because it was formed under pressure. The tension is not incidental to the rope. The tension is what makes the rope. Now apply that image to the years you spent on the third path. Every year of displacement was a thread. Every season of carrying the unnamed grief was a thread. Every moment of functioning well on the outside while working something out on the inside was a thread. Every time you almost gave up on the original call and then found yourself unable to fully let it go, that was a thread. Every conversation that did not know how to hold the full truth of you. Every environment that fit but did not fit all the way. Every dream that reminded your sleeping self of a road you were not currently walking. Every one of those experiences was a thread being twisted into something. You were not waiting in the passive sense. You were being assembled, strand by strand, season by season. The kava was happening, and what has been produced by that process is not a person who is behind. It is not a person who is damaged by the detour. It is a person who is woven, who has a tensile strength that the prepared paths, walked without the particular formation of the third, could not have produced. The rope that is you right now is stronger than it would have been. Not stronger in spite of the third path. Stronger because of what the third path required you to carry and build and endure and refuse to let go of. You are not delayed. You are being assembled. And the assembly is nearly complete. I want to sit with you for a moment in the weight of that word. Nearly complete, because I know that for a chosen one who has been on the third path for a long time, hearing that the assembly is nearly complete can produce a complicated response. There is relief in it. There is also, underneath the relief, a flicker of something that sounds like, I have heard that before. I have felt close before. I have been at the edge of something before and watched it not materialize. And now you are telling me again that something is about to shift, and some part of me wants to believe you, and some part of me is afraid. 2. I want to honor that complexity rather than bulldoze past it. The caution you feel is not faithlessness. It is wisdom earned on a road that has had more than its share of false dawns. And I am not asking you to abandon that wisdom. I am asking you to hold it alongside something else. To let the kairos and the kava frameworks sit next to the caution without canceling it. Because those two ancient understandings of time and formation are not promises made in a vacuum. They are descriptions of a process that has been observed across thousands of years of human experience with the divine. They are the pattern, and you are in the pattern right now. The fog that Dr. James Rivers identified, the suppression of the gamma frequency that happens to chosen ones who carry long seasons of unresolved divergence, begins to lift when the kairos moment arrives. Not as a coincidence, as a mechanism, because the clarity of the appointed time is not only a spiritual reality, It is a neurological one. The brain of a chosen one who is arriving at their Kairos threshold begins to shift. The gamma frequency that has been quiet begins to reassert itself. The signal that has been drifting towards static begins to find the transmission again. If you feel that beginning to happen in you right now, if the clarity I am describing feels less like information and more like recognition, I want to gently remind you that the genius wave exists to support exactly this moment. Not to replace spiritual work, but to give the brain the precise frequency it needs to sustain the clarity that the Kairos threshold is already opening. The link is in the pinned comment below, waiting quietly, without pressure. For the moment you know it is a yes, the rope is strong, the moment is appointed. And what comes next is not a return to what was. It is an arrival at what was always meant to be. Part 6 something is already moving. I want you to feel that before I say anything else, not as a concept to be agreed with intellectually, as a physical awareness, something shifting in the atmosphere around your life, something that has been static beginning to turn, something that was locked beginning to give way at the hinge. You may have noticed it in small ways before today. A conversation that took an unexpected turn towards something significant. A thought that arrived with unusual clarity in the middle of an ordinary moment. A sense, brief and easily dismissed, that the ground beneath your feet was not as fixed as it had seemed. That was not imagination. That was the Kairos threshold making itself known. Before you had language for what you were sensing, now you have the language. And now I want to tell you specifically what is moving. Because chosen ones in this season need more than the assurance that something is coming. They need to know where to look. They have been carrying the weight of the third path long enough that vague promises of change no longer satisfy the part of them that has learned, through hard experience, to need more than generalities. So I am going to be specific. 3 things are moving toward you right now, and I want to name each one plainly. The first thing moving is clarity in the area of purpose, specifically in the place where confusion has lived the longest. For chosen ones who walked the third path, the question of purpose becomes complicated over time in a particular way. It is not that they lose all sense of direction. It is that the original clear signal becomes overlaid with the noise of years of unplanned movement, and the result is a kind of static where the signal still exists but cannot be cleanly heard. You know you are called to something. You have always known that, but the what of it has become blurred by the distance between the call and the road you have actually been walking. The gap between the two has produced a confusion that is not intellectual but almost physical, a kind of internal interference that makes it difficult to hear the frequency of the original assignment clearly. What is moving right now is the clearing of that static, not all at once, not in a single dramatic moment of total revelation, but in the specific, practical, livable form of one clear small step that will make itself known to you. Not the full picture, not the complete map, just the next step. And the reason this is significant is not because one step is enough to see the whole journey, but because one clear step after years of static is the evidence that the frequency is returning, that the gamma clarity that has been suppressed is beginning to reassert itself, that the Kairos moment is not only spiritual but practical, not only felt but actionable. Watch for the one step. It will arrive in a form that is simpler than you expect, and when it arrives, you will know it not because it is accompanied by signs and wonders, but because it will carry a quality of quiet certainty that the noise of recent years has not been able to produce. The second thing moving is in the area of relationship, specifically A relationship that has been strained by the weight of what you have been carrying in secret is beginning to shift. The unnamed grief, the private divergence, the displacement that you have been managing alone, these things do not stay fully contained. They leak into the relational landscape, even when you believe you are protecting the people around you from them. And some of the strain in certain relationships has not been caused by failure of love or commitment. It has been caused by the impossibility of being fully present to someone else when a significant part of you has been occupied with something that could not be spoken. As the clarity returns, as the static clears, as the calling begins to find its voice again inside you, something in the relational atmosphere will shift. Either the relationship that has been strained will find new air to breathe, a new quality of presence from you that it has not had access to during the years of managed displacement, or it will release, not dramatically, not with destruction, but with the quiet recognition that it was built for a version of you that is now completing its transition. And in the space that either opens up or deepens, new people are arriving. People who can hold the full version. People who recognize the calling rather than only the detour. People who will not need you to translate yourself into a language that fits the third path, because they are fluent in the language of the road you were originally built to walk. The third thing moving is in the area of resources and opportunity. And I want to be careful here, because chosen ones who have been on the third path for a long time have often developed a particular relationship with striving. They have learned that on the unplanned road, things must be fought for, pushed toward, and pursued with an effort that is exhausting because the territory was not prepared for them. The provision on the third path required more force than it should have, because you were building in ground that was not designed for what you were trying to build. And that pattern of striving has become so habitual that it may feel like the natural way things work. What is moving now is a different quality of provision, not passive, not requiring nothing of you, but carrying a different texture than the striving you are accustomed to. The opportunities that are beginning to align with your Kairos moment will not require you to force the door. They will require you to recognize it. And that is a different skill entirely. The door that belongs to this season will carry a particular quality that you will be able to identify. If you are paying the right kind of attention, it will feel less like a conquest and more like a recognition, less like something you had to build, and more like something that was waiting to be claimed. Now I want to speak to what you must not do in this season, because this is equally important. Do not return to the habits of the third path out of the familiarity of them. When the clarity begins to arrive, when the door begins to open, when the relationships begin to shift, there will be a pull toward the patterns of the unplanned road, simply because those patterns are known. Familiarity is powerful. The third path, for all its cost, became a known territory. And known territory, even when it does not fit, can feel safer than the open road of the original calling. Resist that pull, not with force, with the quiet, firm awareness that you have already paid the price of the familiar at the expense of the intended. You do not need to pay it again. You can believe in what is coming, not with the fragile hope of someone who has been disappointed before and is trying to manufacture optimism. With the grounded confidence of someone who has just been shown that the Kairos moment is real, that the Kavapa process was real, that the rope that was built on the third path is strong enough to hold the weight of what is coming. That confidence is not arrogance. It is the appropriate response of a chosen one who has finally allowed themselves to see clearly. Chosen ones who walk in this awareness do not just receive what is coming. They carry it and multiply it. Every person who finds their way to this message is part of something larger than a single waiting season, a movement of chosen ones all over this world, arriving at their thresholds simultaneously. If something has shifted in you today, I want to invite you to press like on this message as an act of choosing to be part of that movement. Drop a word in the comments as a signal to other chosen ones that they are not watching alone. And if someone is still in the thick of their waiting season and needs to know the ground is already shifting under them, would you share this with them today? If you want to stay at this table as new messages arrive, subscribing is how you do that. And if you feel moved to sow into the ground that grows something for the next chosen one in line, the link is in the pinned comment below. Type the words I receive in the comments if what I just described is landing somewhere real in you, not as a wish, as a reception, as the chosen one saying out loud, I am no longer bracing against what is coming. I am opening my hands to it. There is a sentence I want to say to you before anything else in this section, and I want you to let it land before you move past it. Everything you built on the third path, every structure you erected in territory that was not prepared for you, every relationship you navigated without the full map, every morning you got up and kept moving in a direction that was slightly wrong but felt like the only direction available, none of that was wasted. Not one day of it, not one decision made in good faith on an unplanned road, not 1 hour of carrying what you carried and still showing up. None of it was wasted because none of it was unseen. And the proof of that is not a feeling. The proof is what you have become. The proof is the person sitting inside this moment right now, who has traveled a road that was not on the original map and arrived here with something that cannot be manufactured by any prepared path alone. I want to give you a name for who that person is. In this season, in this specific chapter of your life, after everything the third path required of you and everything it produced in you, the name that belongs to you is this: Threshold Keeper. Not a title borrowed from someone else's story. Not a name assigned to the general category of chosen ones. This name belongs specifically to the one who walked away from 2 prepared paths, built something real on an unplanned road, paid the full cost of that divergence, and then found their way back to the edge of the original calling without losing the essence of who they were created to be. A threshold keeper is someone who has stood at more thresholds than most people know exist, who has learned through the particular education of the third path what a threshold actually feels like from the inside, what it costs to cross one, what it requires to hold the space of one for long enough that people coming behind you can find it. Let me explain what that means in the context of your life right now. A threshold is not simply a doorway. In the ancient understanding, a threshold was a sacred boundary, the place between what was and what is becoming. The liminal space where the old identity releases and the new one has not yet fully taken form. In many cultures, the threshold was considered the most spiritually charged location in any structure, the place where the seen and the unseen worlds were closest to each other, where what was being held in the invisible began to become visible, where promises made in one realm began to materialize in another. You have been living at a threshold for a long time, not as a punishment, as a preparation. Because the threshold is not just the place you cross through on the way to something else. It is the place where you learn to recognize what a crossing feels like, what it costs, what it asks of you, what you have to set down in order to move through. And a person who has lived at a threshold long enough, who has learned its rhythms and its requirements, who has felt its particular quality of suspension and anticipation and grief and hope all occupying the same space at the same time. That person becomes capable of something that the ones who crossed quickly and easily are not capable of. They become capable of holding the threshold open for others. This is the specific gift that the third path produced in you that neither of the prepared paths could have given you in the same measure. The prepared paths would have taken you through your own crossings efficiently and purposefully, and that would have been good. But the third path took you to thresholds that were not on any map and required you to find your footing without a guide, to learn what a threshold feels like from the inside of the uncertainty, rather than from the comfort of a prepared crossing. And that learning, that embodied, hard-won, deeply personal knowledge of what it is to stand at a threshold without a clear invitation to cross, is exactly what the people who are coming behind you need someone to have. There are people in your life, people who are approaching you right now, or who will approach you in the days and months ahead, who are standing at their own unplanned thresholds. They did not choose the divergence they are living inside, or they did choose it and are now carrying exactly the grief and displacement that you have been carrying. They are going to need someone who does not speak to them from a distance, someone who does not offer them a map from a place of safe arrival. They are going to need someone who can sit down inside the threshold with them and say, "I know this place. I have lived here. I know what it costs, and I know what it produces, and I know that the crossing is real even when it is invisible." That person is you. That is the threshold keeper. And I want to be clear about what being a threshold keeper does not mean. It does not mean you are assigned to remain in difficulty so that you can relate to others in difficulty. The threshold keeper crosses. The threshold keeper moves through. The gift is not in staying at the threshold indefinitely. The gift is in having learned the threshold so thoroughly that the crossing, when it comes, is navigated with a quality of wisdom and intentionality that changes not only your life but the lives of everyone watching you move. Because chosen ones do not cross thresholds quietly. When a threshold keeper moves, people notice. Not because of noise or announcement, but because there is something unmistakable in the quality of a person who has finally arrived at the crossing they were always meant to make. You are that person. You are at that crossing right now. And the name Threshold Keeper is not a consolation prize for the years spent on the third path. It is the precise and accurate description of what those years built in you and what that building now makes you capable of doing in the world. I want to speak some things over you now, not as generalities, as specific words for the specific person you are in this specific moment. May the clarity that has been withheld from you by the fog of the third path arrive now with a speed and a specificity that surprises you. May the next step reveal itself not as a complicated strategy, but as a single, simple, unmistakable direction that your whole body recognizes as right. May the relationships that bent under the weight of what you were carrying find in this new season either the restoration they need to travel forward with you or the graceful release that allows both of you to move into what was always meant to come next. May you not have to fight for the connections that are truly yours. May they arrive and remain with an ease that does not ask you to earn them. May the provision that belongs to your alignment begin to move towards you now in ways that do not require the striving and the uphill effort of the third path. May you receive without immediately looking for the catch. May you recognize what is genuinely given and allow it to be received fully without diminishing it before it has the chance to land. May the dream that went quiet during the years of the third path find its voice again. Not the same voice it had before the divergence, a deeper one, a voice that carries the register of someone who has been through something and come out knowing more than they did when they went in. May you speak the original dream again, out loud, without apology. And may the speaking of it feel less like a risk and more like a homecoming. May the grief of the third path, the genuine and legitimate grief that has been living underground for too long, find its way to the surface in this season and be honored fully, not indulged, not avoided, but honored, given the space it deserves, and then having been honored, may it be set down, gently. At the threshold you are about to cross, left behind, not because it was not real, but because it does not belong in what is coming. What is coming was not designed to carry that weight. It was designed to carry you, the lighter version of you, the one who has grieved fully and is now free to receive fully. And may you know, in the deepest and most settled part of your knowing, that the God who prepared two paths for you and watched you choose a third one did not flinch, did not turn away, did not revise the calling downward to account for the detour. May you know that what is waiting on the other side of this threshold is not a lesser version of the original plan. It is the version that includes everything you learned on the road that was not on the map. The complete version, the one that was always going to require the threshold keeper you have become in order to be fully inhabited. You are ready for this, not almost ready, not nearly ready, ready. The threshold is open, and it has been waiting for exactly you. You are standing at the most practical moment of everything we have walked through together today. And I want to honor that by being specific, because chosen ones who have traveled the full length of a message like this one deserve more than inspiration at the end of it. They deserve to know what to actually do, what to look for, what to expect in the days and weeks ahead as the Kairos threshold opens and the threshold keeper in you begins to move through what has been held in readiness for this exact season of your life. So let me be concrete, let me be honest, and let me speak to the 3 areas of your life that are about to undergo a transformation that is going to require you to be awake enough to recognize it and grounded enough to receive it without either dismissing it or grasping at it too tightly. The first area is relationships. And I want to begin here because for most chosen ones who walked the third path, the relational landscape is where the cost was felt most personally and most quietly. Relationships are where the unnamed grief lived most visibly, even when it was invisible to everyone else. They are where the displacement showed up most clearly, in the conversations that stayed on the surface, in the connections that never quite reached the depth they were capable of, in the loneliness of being known partially by people who were genuinely trying to know you fully, but could not locate the part of you that lived on the prepared paths you never walked. Here is what is about to happen in the relational area of your life. The people who were drawn to the third path version of you, the ones whose connection to you was built primarily on the identity you constructed in the unplanned territory, are going to begin to feel a gentle loosening. Not a dramatic rupture, not a painful severance in most cases. Simply a natural releasing, like a hand that has been holding something, and gradually, without force, opens. Some of these people you will grieve, and the grieving will be appropriate. They were real relationships, they carried real value, but they were relationships that belonged to the third path, and as you cross the threshold into alignment, they will not all make the crossing with you. This is not a failure of love. It is the natural ecology of a life moving into its true season. And into the spaces that are released, new people are going to arrive. And I want to prepare you for how they will arrive, because it will not look the way you might expect. They will not arrive with announcements or introductions that signal their significance. They will arrive quietly, In ordinary moments, a conversation that begins simply and deepens faster than conversations usually deepen. A person who appears in a context that seems too specific to be accidental. Someone who asks you a question that lands in the exact place where you have been holding something private. When that happens, pay attention. Do not let the ordinariness of the arrival make you underestimate the significance of the connection. These new relationships will carry a quality that is different from most of what you have experienced on the third path. They will feel less like work and more like recognition, less like building from scratch and more like resuming something that was paused. And the reason for that quality is not mystical, though it is also that. It is because these people were prepared for the aligned version of you. They were placed in position for the season you are entering and the you that is crossing. The threshold right now is the version of you they were designed to meet. The second area is purpose, and specifically, the very practical question of what to do next. I spoke earlier about the clarity that is coming, the single clear step that will reveal itself without the complicated strategy and the circular reasoning that has characterized the purpose question for too long. I want to add something concrete to that now. The step that is coming will arrive in one of three ways. It will arrive as a thought that returns to you repeatedly over a short period of time, a thought that is not anxious or pressured but simply persistent, present in the morning, still there in the afternoon, returning after sleep. If a thought has that quality of quiet persistence in the days ahead, do not dismiss it as wishful thinking. Receive it as direction. Or it will arrive as an opportunity that appears without you having positioned yourself for it. Something that comes from a direction you were not working toward, offered by someone who had no way of knowing it was exactly what you needed. Arriving at a moment when you had stopped pushing and simply become receptive. When that happens, do not let the surprise of it make you suspicious of it. The provision of the aligned season does not always come through the channels you built on the third path. Sometimes it comes through entirely new ones. Or it will arrive as a conversation. Someone will say something to you, perhaps without knowing its weight, that answers the question you have been carrying. A sentence that lands with a precision that takes your breath away slightly. A word spoken in passing that suddenly makes something clear that has been opaque for months. When that happens, write it down immediately, before the ordinary momentum of the day carries it away. Because the clarity of the Kairos moment is real, but it can be missed if it is not caught and held. Whatever form the step arrives in, the most important thing I can tell you about what to do with purpose in this season is this. Do not wait until the whole staircase is visible before you take the first step. The threshold keeper moves through the threshold one step at a time. The full view comes after the first movement, not before it. Trust the step that is given, move on it, and the next step will become visible from the position the first one places you in. The third area is resources and opportunities. And this is the area where the patterns of the third path are most likely to create interference with what is coming. So I want to be very direct with you here. On the third path, you learn to fight for everything, to justify your presence in rooms that should have welcomed you, to prove the value of your contribution to people who should have recognized it without proof, to negotiate for provisions that should have been given, to push through resistance that should not have been there. You became skilled at all of this. You developed a musculature for it, and that musculature served you. It got you through seasons that would have flattened someone who had not built it. But that musculature, left unchecked in the season that is opening, will cause you to fight for things that are simply waiting to be received. It will cause you to over-negotiate for opportunities that were already yours. It will cause you to brace for resistance in rooms that are actually ready to welcome you. And the bracing itself will create a friction that would not otherwise exist. The practical instruction for this area is deceptively simple. When an opportunity arrives in this new season, and it carries the quality of ease, do not immediately look for what is wrong with it. Do not immediately begin calculating the catch. Receive it. Evaluate it with wisdom, yes, but receive it first. Let it land before you begin to defend yourself against it, because the provision of alignment does not carry the same weight as the provision of the third path. It does not require the same defense, and approaching it with third path strategies will cost you more than the strategies save. Resources are going to move toward you in this season from directions you did not cultivate. Connections are going to open doors that your own effort did not build. Opportunities are going to arrive that fit the aligned version of you so precisely that they will initially feel too good to be true. They are not too good to be true. They are simply what provision looks like when it is meeting a chosen one at their kairos threshold, rather than chasing them down an unplanned road. Receive it, all of it, with open hands and a grounded spirit and the particular confidence of someone who has paid the full cost of the third path and is now standing exactly where the original plan always intended them to stand. If something in these three areas landed in you as a word you needed today, would you leave a short response in the comments below? Even one word is enough. Even 2 or 3 words that say simply, "I am here. I received this. I am ready for what is coming." Your comment becomes a marker for the next chosen one who finds this message and needs to know that others were here before them and recognized exactly what they are recognizing now. And if this message has meant something to you today, a quiet like, a gentle share with someone who is still in the thick of their third path season, a subscription so the next message finds you without you having to search for it. These are small gestures that carry a weight far beyond their size. If you feel moved to do something more, there is a link in the pinned comment below. Not placed there as an obligation, placed there as an open door for anyone who wants to pass something forward to the next chosen one who needs to find their way to these words. Whatever you feel in your heart to offer, that is the right amount. I want to take a moment before anything else to simply say thank you. Not the kind of thank you that is spoken as a formality before moving on to the next thing. The kind that is meant to be received. The kind that carries weight. Thank you for showing up to this message. Not just for being present in a passive sense, but for the particular quality of presence you brought. Because I know what it costs a chosen one who has been carrying the weight of the third path to sit with something like this for this long. To allow themselves to be named. To permit the grief to surface. To stay in the room when the naming got specific and the recognition got uncomfortable. You could have left at any point. You did not, and that is not a small thing. That is the threshold keeper doing what threshold keepers do, standing in the space between what was and what is becoming, holding their ground, refusing to look away. I want you to know that you are not alone in what you have been carrying. Right now, as you receive these words, chosen ones all across the world are sitting with this same message. Some of them are in different time zones, different languages, different circumstances that look nothing like yours on the outside. But inside, in the place where only they live, they are carrying the same unnamed weight that you have been carrying. The same grief over a fork in the road. The same displacement of a life built slightly outside the plan. The same fragile, stubborn, impossible to extinguish knowing that the calling is still intact, still warm, still recognizing itself in them even after everything. You are in a room that is far more crowded than it appears, and not one person in that room arrived here by accident. I want to offer you something now, not a concept, not a framework, a practice, something you can do in the next few minutes, or tonight before you sleep, or in whatever quiet moment finds you next. I want you to imagine as clearly as you can that you are standing at a threshold, not a metaphorical one, a real one, as real as you can make it in your mind. A doorway, made of whatever material feels right to you. Stone, perhaps, or wood, or simply light. And on the side of the threshold where you are standing right now, everything you brought into this message is present. All of it. The grief over the third path, the cost of the years on the unplanned road, the relationships that bent, dream that went quiet, the erosion of trust in your own judgment, the private sorrow that had no clean name, the weight of carrying something unresolved for longer than you should have had to carry it alone. I want you to see all of that clearly, not to condemn it, not to be ashamed of it, simply to see it, to acknowledge that it is real, that it has been real, and that it has cost you something genuine. And then I want you to do something with it, not analyze it further, not try to resolve it in this moment. Simply set it down, as gently as you would set down something fragile. Place it at the threshold, right there at the doorway, on the side where you have been standing. And then I want you to imagine taking one step forward, through the threshold, leaving what you set down behind you, not because it did not matter, not because the grief was not real or the cost was not genuine, but because what is on the other side of the threshold was not designed to carry that weight. It was designed to carry you, the version of you that has grieved fully and is, perhaps for the first time in a long time, free to move without the weight of what the third path cost. You do not have to have this completely worked out to take the step. The threshold keeper does not wait until every question is answered before moving. The threshold keeper moves with what is known, trusts what is sensed, and allows the full picture to assemble itself on the other side of the crossing. Take the step. In your imagination, in your spirit, in whatever inner space is most real to you right now, take one step through and notice what is on the other side, not what you expected, not what you planned for, what is actually there when you arrive. If the genius wave met you somewhere in the middle of this message, if the science of what Dr. James Rivers built landed in a place that felt less like information and more like recognition, if something in you stirred when I described the gamma frequency returning, the fog beginning to lift, the radio finding the signal again, and you know in the quiet way that chosen ones know things that it is a yes, it is waiting for you in the pinned comment below. Not going anywhere, not requiring a decision made under pressure. Simply there, when you are ready, as a tool for the exact season you are stepping into. Something real was built here today, in the space between these words and the place inside you where they landed. That is not nothing. That belongs to both of us now, and it will travel with you into whatever comes next. If this message meant something to you, pressing like is a quiet way of saying so, without needing any words. Leaving something in the comments, even a single word, means that the next chosen one who finds their way to this message does not have to feel like they arrived alone. And if one person comes to mind, someone who has been carrying something they cannot name, sharing this with them is perhaps the simplest and most genuine act of love you could offer them today. If you feel moved to remain in this community of chosen ones who are waking up together, subscribing is simply choosing to stay at the table. And if something in you wants to pass a blessing forward to the next person who needs to find these words, there is a quiet link in the pinned comment below, without pressure, without expectation. Simply an open door. Type the words "I am ready" in the comments if you took that step through the threshold today. Not as a performance, as a declaration that something shifted, and you are not going back to the weight you set down. You are the threshold keeper. The crossing is real, and what is waiting on the other side has your name on it. There is one more thing I want to say before you go, and it is not information. It is not instruction. It is simply a word spoken at the threshold, the way someone who loves you might stand at the door as you are leaving and say one last thing, not because it is necessary, but because it is true, and because you deserve to hear it before you step back into the ordinary world. You are not the same person who arrived at the beginning of this message. Something has shifted. Something has been named that was unnamed. Something has been seen that was unseen. And even if the outer circumstances of your life look identical to what they looked like when you pressed play, the interior landscape is different. The threshold keeper in you has been recognized. The Kairos moment has been named. The kava, the rope that was being braided through every season of the third path, has been held up to the light and seen for what it actually is. Strength, wisdom, a tensile capacity that no shortcut could have produced. You carry all of that with you now, and it does not leave when the message ends. I want to speak a final blessing over you, not a formal one, not one that requires anything of you in return. Simply words spoken from one voice to one heart, across whatever distance separates the place where these words were spoken and the place where you are receiving them. May you wake up tomorrow with a clarity you did not have yesterday. Not a dramatic clarity, not an overwhelming revelation, just 1 degree more of certainty about who you are and what you are here for. 1 degree is enough to change the direction of a life over time. 1 degree of clarity, sustained, becomes a destination. May the people who are meant to walk into this next season with you begin to appear. May you recognize them, not by their credentials or their convenience, but by the particular quality of ease they carry, the sense of recognition, the feeling of resuming something rather than beginning something. May you welcome them without the caution of the third path, without the bracing that served you on the unplanned road, but is no longer required in the aligned season. May the dream that went quiet find its voice again this week, not next year, this week. May it arrive in a small moment, a quiet morning, a still evening, and may you receive it not as a taunting reminder of what has not yet happened, but as a living signal of what is already in motion. May the burden you set down at the threshold of this message stay where you left it. And on the days when you feel the old weight returning, the familiar pull of third path patterns, the habitual bracing, the compulsive second-guessing, may you remember what it felt like to set it down. And may you set it down again, as many times as it takes, without self-judgment, without treating the returning weight as evidence that nothing has changed. It has changed. You have changed. And the practice of setting it down becomes easier each time it is done. You are a threshold keeper. That name belongs to you now. Carry it with the dignity it deserves. Before I release you completely, I want to say something from my heart that I've been wanting to say for some time. This channel exists entirely as a ministry. It is not monetized by YouTube. There are no advertisements. There is no algorithm reward waiting at the end of these videos. Every word in every message is written and recorded as an act of service to the chosen ones who find their way here. And I want to be honest with you about what that means in practical terms. It means that this work is sustained entirely by the community it serves. If these words have meant something to you today, if this message found you at a moment when you needed to be named and seen, If the threshold keeper in you was recognized here, in a way it has not been recognized elsewhere, and if you feel moved to do something with that, there is a donation link in the description and in the pinned comment below. Not placed there as a transaction, not as a requirement for anything that was shared today. Everything shared today was given freely and remains freely given regardless of what you do with this invitation. But if something in you wants to say thank you in a way that goes beyond a comment, if something in you wants to make sure that the next chosen one who is sitting in the middle of their third path grief, who has not yet found language for what they are carrying, can also find their way to a message like this one, then the donation link is the way to do that. You would not be supporting a channel. You would be passing something forward to a person you have never met who needs this exactly as much as you needed it today. That is what your generosity becomes when it moves through this ministry. It becomes the reason the next chosen one finds their way here. A like on this video costs nothing and carries the message further than you can see from where you are standing. A share with one person, just one, is an act of love that may change the entire trajectory of their season. A subscription means that the next message, the one that may be prepared specifically for where you will be standing in 3 weeks or 3 months, finds you without you having to search for it. Every one of these small gestures is a way of saying, this mattered, let it matter to someone else too. You came here carrying the weight of a third path. You are leaving as a threshold keeper standing at a Kairos opening with a braided rope of hard-won wisdom in your hands and a calling that was never canceled waiting on the other side of the crossing. Go, cross the threshold. The other side has been ready for you for a long time, and you were ready the moment you showed up here.